In a world where there is so much wealth, with modern cities and plentiful resources, how can we still have so much poverty? Where do we have to look to understand how it all started? Where some started to become rich and others poor.
Je pense qu'il y a une date qui est tout à fait clé, c'est 1492, quand, à partir de cette année-là, les Européens interviennent d'une manière tout à fait brutale dans l'histoire des peuples de ce qu'on appelle aujourd'hui les Amériques. À partir de ce moment-là, on peut parler d'une globalisation, d'une mondialisation, parce que à peu près l'ensemble des continents de la planète au cours du XVIe siècle sont connectés les uns aux autres et de manière brutale avec une domination européenne qui va progressivement s'étendre ensuite vers l'Asie et vers l'Afrique.
The men who would be known as the conquistadors and the colonizers came from Spain and Portugal, and later from the United Kingdom and Holland. They stole all the riches of the Incas and the Mayas, all the gold and silver, religious artifacts, and jewels, and then started to confiscate the land.
Ore apake do tedukuya kuna rishata nakata nikitii ore apake yo ore apa kabla eton apa etii ilashumba naa enakop apake namanya yiok. Ore apa inakata neponu irmaasai nitaini irmaasai te Kinopop peetumi apa atum ena toki apa najo paratiram nitaini apa te Kinopop neponuni neerari irmaasai pookin omeshomo aapuo anyikaki noo Magadi Sudai mpaka orpolosie tine. Ore ake enakata pee eishari enkitoria ooloibor netii apa kilapa tasati nkishu.
By becoming a British colony, you actually became a property, both the country and the people. And if you look at history, they were not, the natives were not recognized as human beings. So all of you are total property of the empire.
Realmente en el siglo XXI vemos que todavía hay familias cautivas. Nosotros les decimos cautivas o empatronadas, pero son esclavas. Esa es la forma de decirlas. Son esclavas porque no reciben una remuneración por su trabajo. Son deudas que se transmiten de generación en generación. Las personas no pueden salir de la hacienda porque tienen una deuda con el patrón. Y no solamente es la persona, sino es su grupo familiar. Los niños trabajan, no van a la escuela porque deben trabajar. ¿A cambio de qué? De nada, solamente de la alimentación.
Having had their natural economy destroyed forced the people to work for their new masters. It is estimated that today 60 to 80 million people still live in slave-like conditions all over the world.
Chegamos aqui, a gente mesmo com uma boa promessa para aqui, né? Que ia ter aqui tudo em dia, garrafa, bota, tudo em ordem. Quando a gente chegamos aqui, não encontramos, entendeu? E a gente vai receber o material, como recebendo de pouco a pouco. Um chapéu, depois veio as botas, e assim mesmo ainda tem gente aqui que trabalha descalço, porque não tem o material completo.
Para eu poder ganhar uma diária por dia, eu tenho que cortar 40 braças até 32 braças quando está essa cana aqui forte desse jeito. Até 32 braças pelo salário. Se eu não cortar, eu não ganho salário não.
Está R$12,34.
The conquistadors and the colonizers introduced the concept of superiority in terms of race and culture, in which the indigenous people were considered objects destined by God to slave for the white man. This created millions of marginalized people who still today have not recovered their place in society. Even today, while a Mass is celebrated in the Cathedral of Sucre, the former Bolivian capital, the old indigenous people who dare to enter will still sit on the ground.
Empeorado por el sistema siguiente, que me han matado 2 hijos aquí en este barrio. Tengo uno que me lo mataron el viernes, este viernes hace 8 días. Estoy pasando por un dolor muy grande, empezando. Y lo siguiente, que tengo tiempo viviendo aquí, pero como yo he criado a mis hijos sola, lavando, planchando ajeno, haciendo empanadas, haciendo el papa vender, haciendo todo porque mis hijos estudiaban. Y que me mataron más porque él ya se había graduado de licenciado.
The European empires were built on riches stolen from the colonies and on cheap or free labor provided by the slaves. The gold mines of Brazil and the silver mines of Bolivia, like Potosi, provided the European empires with the initial capital needed to start and finance their industrial revolution.
Hay un escritor, Eduardo Galeano, que dice: con toda esta plata que se fue de Potosí, que salió de este cerro, era posible construir un puente de Potosí a España. Entonces imagínense cuánta plata ha salido de esta montaña. Y este hombre dice, se hubiera construido otro puente de Potosí a España con puros huesos de personas que han muerto en las minas.
One of the legacies of colonialism is that the poor countries of the third world are continuing to export raw materials, and the countries of Europe and North America produce and export finished products. This stems from a practice that was developed long ago, and the intention was to make sure that the countries of the third world remain backward and remain dependent and are never able to develop.
C'est très précis. En XVIIIe siècle, l'industrie textile indienne était nettement supérieure en qualité à l'industrie textile britannique. Les Britanniques ont détruit l'industrie textile indienne et ont interdit qu'à l'intérieur de l'Empire britannique, on puisse importer des draps et d'autres produits manufacturés des colonies. Et donc on a tout produit à Londres, en copiant aussi les techniques indiennes. Et alors à partir de Londres, on a exporté du textile, des cotonnades, vers l'Inde et on les a imposées en Inde. C'est une œuvre d'exploitation, de spoliation et de destruction de ce qui existait sur place.
On a à la fois cassé les cadres sociaux et les structures, mais aussi détruit les moyens de subsistance. J'ai parlé tout à l'heure des tisserands indiens, et c'est clair qu'en Inde, quand on regarde chronologiquement l'apparition et le développement des famines, ça correspond aux destructions des structures artisanales, de la propriété paysanne, hein, des réformes foncières imposées par les Anglais.
Now, come the year 2003, they told us that government is coming to invest here. Instead of seeing government, we saw a very unique company. This is a company from USA.
Wan kaka jomodak e area ni, wabedo kwang'iyo loso gik moko kaka lote makonyowa koka pesa kata gik moko kaka cham makonyowa koka yo chiemo. To kuom hau marach ni waneno mana ka Dominion beto, to Dominion guro beacons, to dakika mogik Dominion yao pigni.
And it's quite unfortunate that what he produces there, the little that he produces there, are not sold to us. They are ferried to America.
The resources of the South are fundamental to development in the North. And therefore, the manner in which access and control of those resources are determined becomes crucial for the North. That is where the battle has always been. It has been there for over a century. It continues to be there. So the resource war it will continue.
When the countries of the South won their independence, the accumulated debts of the colonial powers used to open new markets were transferred to the newly formed governments in total violation of international laws. The only solution offered by the North was more debt with extremely high interest in order to repay the initial one. These newly formed states immediately lost their sovereignty and became even more dependent upon the northern countries, which could then dictate policies on agriculture, trade, and customs, and give special privileges to foreign corporations, such as monopolies over mineral extraction or monoculture exploitation.
El único que puede contratar créditos con los organismos internacionales es el Estado boliviano, es el Estado. Por consecuencia, el Estado, cuando contrata créditos bien o mal utilizados, ¿quién los paga? No es el gobierno boliviano, lo pagan los ciudadanos bolivianos con sus impuestos. En un momento dado había que cada niño que estaba naciendo ya estaba con una porción importante.
We will identify a country, usually a developing country, that has resources we covet, our corporations covet, like oil. And then we arrange a huge loan to that country from the World Bank or one of its sister organizations. The country's left holding this huge debt that it can't possibly repay. So at some point, we economic hitmen go back in and we say, you know, you can't pay your debts. You owe us a pound of flesh. You owe us a big favor. So sell your oil real cheap to our oil companies, or vote with us on the next critical United Nations vote, or send troops in support of ours to someplace in the world.
Sub-Saharan Africa, which is the poorest part of the world, is paying $25,000 every minute to northern creditors. Well, you could build a lot of schools, a lot of hospitals, you could make a lot of job creation if you were using $25,000 a minute differently from debt repayment. So there's this drain, and I think people don't understand that it is actually the South that is financing the North.
Meu marido está desempregado faz 5 anos. E é isso, ele vende água mineral R$1, né? Pra gente sobreviver. A gente
eu trabalhava fazendo entrega de gás. Eu trabalhava lá em Suape, mas como agora a venda de gás aumentou e a população diminuiu, pronto. Aí foram cortando e eu tô aqui vivendo como pode.
Antes a gente não morava aqui não, a gente morava na beira da praia. Mas aconteceu um acidente familiar. Minha menina faleceu com 9 meses. Aí a gente teve que ir pra rua pedir dinheiro.
By the beginning of the 20th century, the entire Third World had been split up among the powers of the North. The 2 world wars forced the North to create new tools to stabilize the now global economy. The IMF and the World Bank were created with such an agenda, but rapidly they turned their focus toward the Third World. This new U.S.-born economic model became known as neoliberalism, and the set of policies used to enforce it became the Washington Consensus, which forced all economies to let the market govern everything.
Bolivia became the lab rat. Bolivia was absolutely the chief test lab in South America for these policies of privatization, market fundamentalism, the things that led to the water revolt.
El gobierno boliviano, por decisión e imposición del Banco Mundial, decide privatizar el agua y para esto el gobierno toma 2 medidas. Primero, la redacción de una ley de agua potable y el contrato de concesión por 40 años con la empresa transnacional Bechtel.
It was like the last thing to privatize here because the governments before already privatized everything, you know, railroads, airlines, telecommunications. So like water was the last frontier to cross.
Porque ese llamado no solamente afectaba a las cooperativas o los pozos de agua, sino que también estaba incluyendo en las aguas de lluvia inclusive.
They came here and within a month of taking over, they raised people's water rates by an average of 50%, in some cases double and more. People took to the streets and said they wouldn't take it and faced down bullets, face down a state of martial law.
Et c'est effectivement ce qui se passe aujourd'hui. Les pays sont formellement, politiquement indépendants, ils ont leur propre gouvernement, mais ils sont dans un ensemble institutionnel qui réintroduit une forme de néocolonialisme, puisque toute une série de politiques qui sont appliquées dans les pays du Sud, endettés, sont dictées à partir de Washington, du siège de la Banque mondiale, du Fonds monétaire international.
The Washington Consensus was a set of policies that was a consensus between 15th Street in Washington and 19th. 15th Street is where U.S. Treasury is. 18th is where the World Bank. 19th is where the IMF. It was not a consensus among the developing countries. It was a consensus among a relatively small group of people who had a particular mindset. And a particular mindset during the period, you have to remember that Reagan was president of the United States, Thatcher was leader in the UK, a very conservative mindset that didn't reflect good economic policy, economic theory, as I would understand good economic theory. It had a particular political view of economics.
We are 3 children. I'm Joseph. This is my sister, she's Helen, but she's disabled, and my other brother, he's called Josephat Odongo, and he's also disabled. So among the 3 of us, I'm the only person who at least can do something. I'm not at school because I'm supposed to pay 4,000 for the exam fees and 10,000 for the school fees, and my mom is earning 3,000, so I'm still at home. I cannot get the money. Okay, I can say life in the slum is very hard. Okay, sometimes we do go without even eating supper now. The small that we have, we do share among ourselves. Some people are eating 3 meals per day, and for you can just have 1 meal a day.
Neoliberalism managed to bankrupt many of the economies of the South, which allowed international capital to take over. This was achieved by imposing a new form of structural violence that was used for decades to maintain these countries in a state of underdevelopment. The special agents and economic hitmen were born and became the new, less visible means to maintain such control over the globe's resources.
If we don't like what a democratically elected leader of another country is doing, for example, opposing the exploitation of oil in his country, someone who looks like me will walk into that president's office. I had the job at one time. Walks into the office and says, and now I just want to remind you that I can make you and your family very, very rich if you play my game, our game. Or I can see to it that you're thrown out of office or assassinated if you decide to fulfill your campaign promises. And usually it's said a little more subtly than that because there may be a tape recorder listening. But they get the message because every one of those presidents knows what happened to Arbenz of Guatemala and Allende of Chile and Roldos of Ecuador and Lumumba of the Congo and Torrijos and on. The list is very long of presidents that we have had thrown out or assassinated.
In fact, the CIA was the private army of the president, being used for highly dubious, virtually invariably disastrous interventions in other people's countries, starting with the overthrow of the Iranian government in 1953 for the sake of the British Petroleum Company. We declared that the elected prime minister of Iran, Mohammad Mossadegh, was a communist. He was simply trying to regain some control over Iranian oil assets. And the British wanted him out and talked Eisenhower into doing the dirty work.
I've got 6 children. 3 are boys and 3 are girls. So I'm working so hard so that they cannot go to bed without food.
I'm a father of 5. And in fact, we have poverty, but we don't know how we can come out of that.
Because our stomachs are very small. Because we don't have every time food, so our stomach are very small.
Our chosen economic system always was, and still is, financed by the poor. They did so first by giving up their land and their access to natural resources, then by financing its expansion through debt repayment, unfair trade, and unjust taxes on their labor and consumption. In addition, by forcing the poor to overpay for energy, food, and other basic necessities, the North ensures that poverty will deepen and inequalities will increase.
24,000 people die every single day from hunger and hunger-related diseases. At least 24,000. And that doesn't need to happen. We have plenty of resources, so that shouldn't happen. It happens because of the system we've created. We can say without a doubt that this system is an absolute failure. From the most rational, objective economic standpoint, it's a failure. Less than 5% of the world's population live in the United States. We are consuming over 25% of the world's resources and creating roughly 30% of its major pollution. That's a failure.